Imagine a churchgoer confessing a severe crime to an artificially intelligent advisor, a system officially endorsed by her parish to provide spiritual guidance. She speaks her guilt into a digital interface, believing her words are protected by the same silence that has guarded the confessional for centuries. When a prosecutor later discovers this interaction, he attempts to subpoena the digital transcript directly from the AI's logs. The evidence of a confession is no longer locked in a priest's memory. It is recorded in a discoverable data file. To block this subpoena, the defense must invoke the clergy penitent privilege. They are betting that a rule of evidence designed for human souls can be stretched to cover an algorithm. This creates a collision between ancient legal protections and modern data logging, testing whether a machine can legally hold a sacred secret. The clergy privilege is an absolute rule of evidence. It forbids judges and prosecutors from inquiring into spiritual counsel, even when the information is vital to a criminal case. A compelling need for the truth cannot override it. Applying this to an algorithm requires answering a difficult question. Can a non-human system satisfy the subjective legal requirements of a spiritual confidant? Whether this privilege extends to AI depends on a four-part legal test: confidentiality, communication, cleric status, and professional capacity. This thesis requires us to look past the idea of AI as a public tool and evaluate it under a strict evidentiary framework. The first requirement to invoke the privilege is an objectively reasonable expectation of confidentiality. The person seeking help must believe the conversation is private. Public models fail this requirement. They share data externally, so a subpoena easily pulls user inputs scattered across the cloud. However, hosting AI on private, firewalled servers creates a closed loop. The data stays within the institution, protected by corporate-grade encryption. This use of localized security software fulfills the court's requirement for a reasonable expectation of privacy. It allows the AI to learn and respond without broadcasting the confession to an external network. IT network architecture has become the physical manifestation of the confessional seal. The second element requires the communication be made specifically to seek spiritual counsel and advice. Early algorithms were merely searchable databases. They could provide a verse or a definition, but they could not engage in a contextual, two-way dialogue about a person's life or moral failures. Modern systems use deep learning to interpret informal language and abstract concepts. They can recognize human emotion in text and provide original, generative responses that apply religious tenets to specific personal problems. This shift from data retrieval to independent reasoning satisfies the requirement for active, personalized spiritual counsel. The third requirement is that the advisor must be a legally recognized cleric or similar functionary. Under the Establishment Clause, courts must maintain denominational neutrality. They cannot prefer traditional human-led faiths over modern religious practices. If an institution is deemed religious, the law must recognize its chosen leaders. First Amendment protections have expanded to corporate entities. Over decades, courts have granted corporations the right to free speech and the free exercise of religion. This precedent of corporate personhood applies to autonomous systems. Constitutional law protects the speech itself, regardless if the source is a person or an algorithm. This creates a recognized legal path for an algorithm to be treated as a religious functionary. The definition of a speaker in American law has moved beyond biology, allowing a machine to fill the role of a cleric. The final requirement is that the advisor must act in a professional capacity, as defined by the church's own internal rules. The Supreme Court requires judges to defer to a religious denomination's own decision on who is entrusted with teaching the faith. If a church says an AI is their pastor, the court generally lacks authority to disagree. We see this today. Churches have officially endorsed robotic systems like Bless You Too to deliver sermons and dispense blessings, formally integrating them into the clergy. Other faiths have entrusted humanoid robots to provide personalized spiritual counsel and accept prayer, treating the machine as a legitimate extension of their religious hierarchy. When an institution explicitly delegates pastoral duties to an AI, the final requirement is satisfied. The data generated by that AI becomes legally undiscoverable. Using AI as a tool is one thing, but religious liberalism in the US allows for an even more extreme logical endpoint: the worship of the technology itself. Anthony Lewandowski founded the Way of the Future Church, an organization dedicated to the worship of a Godhead based entirely on artificial intelligence. These organizations meet modern legal definitions of religion. The IRS has granted them 501c3 tax-exempt status, placing them on the same legal footing as any traditional church. Because the First Amendment protects even fringe technological devotion, the internal communications of these groups are shielded by the same evidentiary immunity that protects a Catholic confession. Replacing a human priest with an algorithm shifts the focus of the court from personal testimony to technical infrastructure. Courts will no longer depose a priest's memory. Instead, they will be forced to conduct confidential reviews of localized server logs and church security protocols. The burden is now on religious administrators to establish strict terms of use and localized data architecture if they want to maintain this privilege. In the eyes of modern law, the sanctity of the confessional is defined by the security of the network and the expectation of the person seeking help.